Hello, I'm back again after a brief hiatus. I can only presume if you're watching this that the internet plays a fairly important part in your life, and I'm going to be looking at three books today which have all been shaped by the influence of the internet. Apologies in advance for any building noise that you can hear next door. Anyway, first up we have Meat Space by Nikesh Shukla, which is published by the Friday Project. This is narrated by Kitab Balasubramaniam. He is a young man for whom life has not been going very well. His girlfriend's left him, he's lost his job, he's lost his mother, and he's been working his way through the life insurance money instead of knuckling down and writing his next novel. He has a very close relationship with his brother, and they spend a lot of time trying to write amusing tweets, seeing how many retweets they get on Twitter. Their life is very heavily influenced by Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, their life on the internet. And when his brother discovers his doppelganger on the internet, he goes off to America to track him down and to get into all sorts of exciting escapades. Left on his own, Kitab is contacted by somebody himself. Somebody with exactly the same name as him contacts him on Facebook, wanting to be his friend. This is all fine, of course, in the virtual world, but when Kitab too turns up in the flesh, it's a whole different ballgame, and we have a sort of rather awkward comedy of manners, I guess you call it, where he has to deal with this person turning up on his doorstep. So it's a very funny novel about the way that we live in the virtual world and how we can struggle, therefore, with our close relationships. As I said, his girlfriend has left him, and this in part to do with the reason for that being that they kept looking at their smartphones rather than looking at each other. So there's lots of comedy there, and a lot of comedy particularly with his relationship with his father, who, being a widower, has begun internet dating and is far more successful in the love game than his own son, and has plenty of advice to dispense along the way, not only about relationships but about his writing as well. The clever sleight of hand is that towards the end of the novel there is not a twist but a revelation which is very, very moving actually, and means that you then look back on the novel that you've read in a very, very different light, which I think is quite an achievement. So a book that manages to combine humour and sort of insight about the modern world, but also to become a very moving human story towards the end, something very, very personal. So there we go, that is Meat Space. Next we have To Rise Again at a Decent Hour by Joshua Ferris, which is published by Viking. I didn't read Ferris's debut, Then We Came to an End, which was an office comedy. I did read his second novel, The Unnamed, which is far from comedy, about a man's compulsion to walk. A very strange and dark and interesting book, which I would recommend. This third novel goes back to the comedy and follows a dentist, Paul O'Rourke, in America, a man very distrustful of the internet and the modern world, who likes to keep himself isolated, and is therefore very surprised to discover that his dental practice spawns a website overnight, apparently written by him, but not written by him, and he wants, of course, to find out who has written it and get it taken down. Eventually, he makes contact with this other Paul O'Rourke, and he is told that he may be part of a rather obscure religious sect called the Ulms. And this is interesting in terms of looking at his previous life, because he tells us that he had been in relationships with women in the past, and he almost fell in love with not just them, but with the whole family, and has been through relationships with both a Roman Catholic and a Jewish family. And it turns into a novel about religion in modern America. The opening section is lots of very fertile comedy about the modern world and modern America in particular through oral health and dentistry, which is a bizarre combination, but trust me, it works. Then we get this stuff about religion and about identity as well. And in that way, it reminded me of a book called Operation Shylock by Philip Roth, where the writer, Philip Roth, discovers that another Philip Roth is saying all sorts of things in his name about Israel and Palestine, lots of incendiary and inflammatory stuff, and so he has to travel over there to find out who this other Philip Roth is. Whilst thinking about this comparison, I suddenly thought, I wonder if Ferris could develop into a writer in the same mould as Philip Roth. Is he the natural heir? There's something about his comedy and his passion and his insight which is Rothian. I'm not claiming that he is the natural heir, but it would be really exciting if he was. So if I'm going to lay down a challenge for you, Joshua, that is it. Now that Roth said he's not going to write any more books, maybe you could pick up the mantle. Anyway, that's that. And finally we have No Harm Can Come to a Good Man by James Smythe, which is published by Borough Press. Whilst I'm waiting for the next instalment in his Anomaly Quartet, his science fiction writing, here we have some of his sort of straight fiction, I guess you call it. And this looks into the near future, the year 2020, and a man called Lawrence Walker, who's an American senator, who is looking to get the Democratic nomination to run for president. In this near future, there is something called Clear Vista, a piece of software a bit like Google, which not only can tell you the best route to work and the cheapest price for something that you want to buy, it also has predictive qualities. So it might tell you, for example, what car you should buy based on your own profile and interests. And for Lawrence Walker, it becomes important because these predictive qualities are the idea being that they will help shore up his nomination for the presidency by predicting his success and showing that he's the right candidate. He has been an American hero. He's been a soldier. He was captured whilst fighting abroad. He was tortured and he came back from that. And indeed, his campaign stutters initially because their family suffered the tragedy of losing their son to a drowning. But in fact, that in a way almost bolsters his support because he is seen to be a man who has been through a family tragedy and come through the other side. However, when he fills in the rather exhaustive survey that he has to fill in for a Clear Vista prediction, it gives him a 0% chance of success. So we then have a rather strange thriller which is about him and his PR guru trying to get their campaign back on track. But then this idea that how much are we or our futures determined by what we are told is going to happen. Given that he's been told there's a 0% chance of success, when his campaign seems to go off the rails, how much was that always going to happen, and was it predicted by the software, or how much has it been caused to happen by the prediction itself? And that's why I might call it almost an existential thriller, because the question is, how much is Lawrence Walker always going to become the man that he becomes, and how much is it caused by what happens throughout the novel? A very, very interesting idea, and a very much darker look at the malign influence of the internet and of technology and of certain types of predictive software. A very, very interesting look at a potential path of our futures, and so different, of course, to the humour and the comedy of the other two books that I've looked at. So there we are, 3 books, all very different, but all coming, I think, from the same sort of place. Next, I'm going to be looking at a couple of very, very interesting debuts, some graphic fiction, and indeed a second novel. So lots of exciting things coming up. Look forward to speaking about those soon. Take care.